Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing a beginner's guide to resin beach coasters. My mom here already has her molds out and ready, and the first thing she's going to be doing is mixing in her resin. She'll be using craft resin, which is a 1-to-1 ratio by volume. So she has 2 cups and she'll be pouring equal amounts of the A and B. You'll want to check the instructions on your resin bottle to make sure that you're pouring the correct amount of A and B. Some resins measurements go by weight and some go by volume, so this is also another very important thing to check. Before you get started, you'll also want to make sure that you have all of the proper safety equipment. This includes nitrile gloves, a respirator mask, and a well-ventilated area. We also like to protect our workspace by using baking paper. This not only protects the surface from drops of resin, but once hardened, those drops of resins come off very easily. I'll have a discount code in my description if you want to give craft resin a try. These cups have ridges so you can easily follow the amount of resin that you're pouring and be sure that you're pouring equal amounts into each cup, but an even easier way to do this is to use a measuring cup. She pours both parts into 1 cup and mixes well for around 5 minutes. You want to mix your resin slowly not to cause too many air bubbles, while also being sure to scrape the edges and the bottoms so that it's all being thoroughly mixed. For a set of 4 coasters, we typically use around 200 to 250 grams of resin, and my mom did end up mixing in more resin after this because she decided to do a larger batch of coasters. In a separate cup, she starts to add in various kinds of decorative sand. Then she adds a small amount of DuPont's Luxury Gold Ghost Pearl to add a beautiful shine and shimmer. She pours in a small amount of resin and then mixes that all together. I'll have all of the products that you see in this video listed in my description, so if you're interested in following this tutorial, be sure to give that a look. Now she'll be mixing in her pigment, so she separates some resin into a different cup. And again adds in some of the Luxury Gold Ghost Pearl for a nice shine. Then she takes DuPont's alcohol ink in the shade Intense Teal and adds a generous amount into her resin. And in this close-up, you can really see the nice sparkle that Ghost Gold Pearl provides. She wants her blue to be a little bit darker, so she adds in a few more drops. Now she starts off by adding a very small amount of resin towards the bottom of her molds where she'll be adding in her sand, and this little base layer of resin can help to prevent excess air bubbles. Then, using a wooden stick, she carefully applies her sand. She pours her teal pigmented resin into a smaller cup for better control, and also separates some clear resin into a smaller cup as well. And she starts pouring her teal pigmented resin towards the top of the molds. And if any of your blue pigmented resin starts to flow over your sand area just a little bit too much, you can take some clear resin and pour on top of the sand, and that will push that blue resin right back. And this is why it's a great idea to have some clear resin set aside. Using a collection of seashells that she's gathered from the beach, she carefully places them onto the sand area. and you can use a thin wooden stick to help with the placement of your shells. She's using a torch gun to pop any air bubbles, and if you are using a torch gun, you'll want to be very mindful to move it quickly so that you don't burn your resin or your molds. There are other ways that you can pop air bubbles in resin, but we find the torch gun to be the most efficient. She allows this layer of resin to harden and comes back the next day to demold. Here's a little sneak peek of what they're looking like so far. Though she is going to be flipping them right back over to be able to apply liquid latex, and she pours some close to the edge on all of her coasters. This is because while doing the waves on the coasters, it's going to be done out of the molds. And this is the best way to do the waves because if you try to do it in the mold, it allows for a lot more movement and the likelihood of your waves being brought back towards you and losing their shape is very high. So liquid latex will protect the bottom side of your coasters from any drops of resin. We have our liquid latex in a condiment bottle for easy application. Your bottle may get a little clogged sometimes, and this is just due to dried up liquid latex and is very easy to remove. It can just be a little messy, but comes off easily with an alcohol wipe or with some soap. Then she uses a silicone makeup brush to help spread the liquid latex to the very edge. You'll want to allow enough time for your liquid latex to dry before you're able to start your next resin layer. Although it doesn't have to be fully dry, just dry enough so that it doesn't budge when you turn your coaster over. So this time frame can typically be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour or an hour and a half if you want your liquid latex to be fully dried. You can also go over your liquid latex with a heat gun to help speed up the drying process. Once the liquid latex is mostly dried, she flips the coasters over and props them up onto cups. She mixed in her resin once more, following all of the same steps that I showed in the beginning of the video. Again, she's using Deppon's alcohol ink in the shade Intense Teal, but this time is adding just a few drops for more depth. And for the waves, she's going to be using just Resin's pigment paste in the shade Titanium White. Before applying your pigment paste into your cup of resin, you'll want to mix it in the container first, because while that container is sitting, some of its parts can separate. She adds a small amount into her cup of resin and mixes that in well. This is our favorite white pigment to use to achieve cells and lacing, and I'll have it linked in my description with a discount code. She takes her clear resin and starts to pour along the shoreline. She's going to be leaving her sand area without another layer of resin, and this will also help prevent that the waves, once blown out, won't come back in. Then she pours her teal pigmented resin towards the middle and top area of the coasters. And she uses a silicone makeup brush to help push around the resin and make sure that it's covered the whole area and reach the very edges. She goes in with her torch gun to pop any air bubbles. If you're enjoying this tutorial, be sure to let me know by leaving a comment below and a like. And if you'd like to help support our YouTube channel, you can become a channel member and gain early access to videos. Now my mom is ready to add on her white pigmented resin, and using a wooden stick, she carefully applies it along the shoreline. And now comes the important part of achieving cells and lacing in your resin. Before adding on your white pigmented resin and blowing out your waves, you'll want to check how long your resin's work time is. You can wait around the end of your resin's work time depending on the temperatures that you're working in. But if your resin's work time is around 45 minutes, you can wait about 30 minutes to allow your resin to thicken, therefore restricting excess movement within your resin. And this is what helps to create lacing and the most important factor in making sure that it stays put. You can also experiment by waiting a bit longer or shorter to see what works best for your resin. Then she takes a heat gun and blows out the waves. As with any resin project, you'll want to check that your surface is leveled before you get started, because resin is self-leveling, and if your surface isn't leveled, then your resin project won't be leveled either. This especially goes for beach coasters and blowing out your waves, because you are propping them up onto cups, and if you're reusing cups which have some hardened resin on them, it can cause your coaster to not be leveled, and if it's not, your wave likely won't stay put. And my mom here is able to achieve some beautiful lacing. And there is this one coaster where this wave is just taking on a life of its own. So to help control that a bit, my mom takes a silicone makeup brush and just wipes off that excess white pigment that she wants to get rid of. To achieve a flawless finish, you'll also want to top coat your coasters. If you decide to leave your sand area without resin while doing your waves, this top coat is especially important to make sure that that surface is all leveled. However, we do a top coat regardless because we like to have a nice shiny finish, and it also creates really nice domed edges. So she leaves this as is and allows this layer to harden. So before doing your top coat, or especially if a few days have gone by, you can sand down your coasters, and this is a great way to ensure that those resin layers will bond together. To minimize the mess, she's dripping some water over the coasters, and this will prevent dust from flying everywhere. Just like while working with resin, while you're sanding, you'll want to make sure to wear gloves and a respirator mask so you don't inhale any of that dust. She has a sanding tool which makes this process so easy, and she goes over each coaster one by one. Once she's done, she gives them a nice rinse and they're all ready for their top coat. She didn't film this process, but it's very similar to the process you saw earlier of adding resin out of the mold. But if you would like a full detailed video on this, I'll leave one linked above. Once her top coat is complete, she's able to remove her liquid latex. She also added on a gold trim. You can add a gold trim by using a gold paint marker or some gold varnish. And here's the final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on my Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art.